Okay, dude, so today let's talk about how Resident Evil Village is my Stardew Valley. It is literally my special winter cozy game. And let me just show you why. Just watch this real quick. Okay, but seriously, you cannot tell me that that is the funniest thing you've ever seen. Like, high key. But in all seriousness, let's get into it. Let's talk about it a little bit. So, this is the first Resident Evil game I had ever played. Okay, I am a giant pansy. I am so easily scared. One of the scariest things for me is being chased. So think about like any Resident Evil game, how many times you're chased. I mean, you're chased with a freaking chainsaw. There's like this big looming dude that chases you around. You cannot escape being hunted down in these games. Okay, and I am a pansy. Okay, I am easily scared, especially with the level of audio quality that these games are known for. Like, I just get the shit scared out of me, to be frank. So I was originally introduced to Resident Evil after the launch of Cyberpunk 2077. If you remember that launch, then you probably remember the deep, pervasive disappointment that was screamed, literally scrumped across the internet. There was nothing that anyone could talk about for freaking months. Cyberpunk dropped in December, and that was of 2020, and then Resident Evil, I think, in May of 2021. So, and okay, to kind of give a little bit more context, I'm a massive Witcher fan. Okay, anything that CD Projekt Red touches, I was like, you could take a shit, and I would be like, that's made of gold, because that is how much I love The Witcher, especially the Wild Hunt. I mean, my closet is full of the shirts that they released for The Witcher. I have all the Cyberpunk shirts that came out before the launch. I have statues. I have comics. I am just a massive fangirl. I think for The Witcher, The Wild Hunt, I've probably sunk over 1,000 hours into it across multiple platforms. I'm talking about Xbox, PC, PlayStation. I even had it on the fucking like OG Switch. Okay, like the original one before like not the OLED, but the one before that. Okay, so I mean, I am like a massive fan, and I don't think I have ever been more disappointed by a launch. Okay, around that time, there wasn't really anything else that was coming out that I was super interested in playing. And to be real, the sheer letdown of how massively crappy Cyberpunk 2077 was at that time just put me into a super deep like gaming slump, super funk. And gaming is just one of those hobbies I'm super passionate about. It's the reason that I've made this YouTube channel. I love games. I love talking about games. I love playing games. I love researching games. It's just, something that I don't normally talk to people in my regular life about because it's just not a shared hobby. So at the time, for me to kind of lose that connection to games, it was just, it was like high-key depressing, okay? I had heard about Resident Evil before and just sort of just brushed it off because it wasn't really my genre. Again, I'm someone that gets scared very easily. I tried playing Outlast when it originally came out and made the mistake of, sitting in a dark room while I was doing that. And there's a scene where you're in a basement and you need to hide in a cabinet from something. And I've tried to play that game a couple times, and every time I get to that bit, I just have to turn the game off. I cannot finish that game because I find that so terrifying. So if you can think about how genuinely kind of how genuinely scary something like Outlast is, then, an action horror game like Resident Evil, you can imagine for someone like me, that's like, even though Resident Evil isn't the scariest thing ever, and I understand that a little bit now, it does certainly have its moments of genuine terror. In particular, I'm someone that hates any chase scenes. I get super freaked out. I don't know what it is about it. I just cannot abide it. It just freaks me the heck out. I had a friend that played Resident Evil 7, and I saw the scene where you're being chased around the house with the freaking chainsaw. When I saw that, even though she's telling me, hey, this game is so freaking good, you gotta play it, you'll love it, I did not play that game because I did not think that I could handle sitting through that chase scene. And I certainly was like, I can't beat that game because I'll be too terrified to beat that game. So I ended up watching a playthrough, a no commentary playthrough of Resident Evil Village, just because the setting of the game really, really, really interested me. I mean, you're talking about a rustic European village. There's this amazing, majestic castle, these towering mountains, there's snow, there's these gnarly, black, twisted trees, vampires, and at the time we didn't know too much about the game except there was a hot dommy mommy that was going to be in that game. So my sheer hype for the setting is what encouraged me to watch a playthrough, and through that playthrough, and I watched it to the end, but through that playthrough, I decided that just watching that playthrough by itself was so amazing that I wanted to experience the game for myself. So obviously going into the game, everything was spoiled, right? So I knew where jump scares were. I knew what kind of enemies you were going to be facing. I knew who the bosses were, how to defeat them. The game itself wasn't that much of a mystery to me. And that is even more to the point of how amazing this game was, that not only did I watch a full playthrough, with no commentary, by the way. So the only personality is the game itself, which speaks volumes for the character of the game. But I went into the game knowing exactly what was going to happen and still came out the other side absolutely loving it. In fact, loving it even more because once I played this game, I turned around and started playing all of the remakes. I even tried the original Resident Evil. I did not get through that, by the way. That was it's it's not the scare factor. It's just a very, very dated game, and I think a lot of people who would still play that game would play it for nostalgia, and I just don't have that kind of investment. But Resident Evil Village was a completely different thing. I even went back and played Resident Evil 7, which is the one that I was so convinced that I wouldn't be able to play because I thought I would be too terrified. My strategy for being able to play these games, which again, some of the mystery was taken away, so some of the scare factor was gone. However, it still, even to this day, I get a little bit scared. I mean, you're in this super dark dungeon, you've got a little bit of flashlight and like a super underpowered gun at the beginning of the game, and there's just like shit crawling out at you from, there's like skeletal, creepy, shrouded things with swords and axes, and they're making these croaking noises, and it really like hits something for me. It really triggers that fear response. So one of my tactics to be able to get through this game, or even Silent Hill 2 remake, I played that when that came out, and and that's a terrifying game. That's a super, super scary game. My tactic for that is to turn the volume down on my headset, or not to even use a headset at all, because a headset's super immersive, so I might just have it on speakers, just so I don't have the super deep immersion of all those additional sounds that you pick up with a headset, and that makes it a little bit more tolerable for me. Also, I tried to just play it during the daylight, or if I did play it, my girlfriend was in the same room with me, or I had all the lights on. Just anything that would make it a little bit easier for me to play that game. So you might be listening to all this and thinking, okay, so how exactly is this your cozy game? And to that, I would say it's honestly every aspect of this game hits perfectly. And I have seen people say, okay, well, this isn't really a Resident Evil game. And to that, I'm biased because this was my introduction into the series. So, and it was a really good introduction. So for me, I'm like, you can't say anything bad about this game. Even if you want to get into, you know, the writing and like, you know, freaking Ethan being a mold man, whatever. Okay. Like, I hear you. However, I will not be swayed to the greatness of this game. And this goes from the setting of the game. I mean, you're in this remote European snow-laden village, right? And you're going through different biomes of horror, if that makes sense. I mean, you're going from a lush, elaborate castle. You walk into almost every room and there's a crackling fireplace greeting you, to a house with a haunted doll, to a fishery with a madman, to this vast warehouse factory with metal and monstrous metal creations, and within everything else there are secrets to obtain. The encounters that you have with enemies are fairly challenging. The AI is pretty good. They're ducking, they're weaving, they're bobbing, they're stinging. There's a minor crafting and looting system, which is not so elaborate that it distracts you from the rest of the game. The inventory management, honestly, not that difficult, which I personally appreciate. You can even expand it through the merchant. You can attack animals and kill them to then give to the merchant so that he can craft you food, which will then upgrade your stats. The game design itself, just the level design, is amazing. Even though, through my first play, even though I had obviously watched it, right, I did find myself getting, you know, like a little bit backtracked here and there. But that's just because of the scope, not necessarily because of poor game design, in my opinion. I would say that's basically because I'm a dope, right? This is just a game that I keep coming back to every single year. Every October, this is the first game that I play, and I'm always excited for it. Even now, I played like a little bit of this to get gameplay footage, and I'm holding myself back from playing the rest of it because I want to be able to play it again in October, which obviously I can, but there's just something about it being a seasonal treat, sort of, you know, like this is my spooky season game that I always play. And to that rotation, I've also added Resident Evil 4 remake. I did play the original before the remake came out and absolutely loved it. Nothing bad to say about that game. I will say, for a very long time, Resident Evil Village, I didn't feel like anything was clunky. Everything felt like super smooth. After playing some more recent shooters that have come out within the last couple years, well, actually within the last year, I won't say couple years, within the last year, I will say that Resident Evil Village is finally kind of starting to feel a little bit dated. Graphically, it still looks amazing. The voice acting is incredible. I mean, there's the level of detail alone within this game that creates just a overwhelming, amazing atmosphere. It literally can't be touched. But as far as the gameplay, it is starting to feel not stale, but it is starting to feel a little bit dated, unlike Resident Evil 4. And I think Resident Evil 4 Remake just has such a fantastic gameplay loop that it's just, you know, it's hard to compare something that's older to that. Hey dude, so all that to say, once again, Resident Evil Village is my wintertime cozy game. I know you're not, you know, like harvesting corn or planting flowers or building a barn and like naming your chickens things like McNuggets. This is a game that I know backwards and forwards, and I can settle into the gameplay very easily. It's not something that I would call mindless. However, every time I come back to it, it's just comforting. It's not overly simplistic, but it does very obviously just ping all the dopamine points in my brain. So, you know, every winter, or I should say every October, I live in California, so like we don't actually have winters, but every October I make a list of games that I'm gonna play for spooky season, and it's typically Village, Resident Evil 4, I've added the Dead Space remake. I'm actually playing that right now because I didn't play it this year, so I'm playing through that right now. I'm going to be posting a video of my thoughts of that video, or excuse me, of that video game, because it is amazing. I can't have a channel and not have that game mentioned. The second one, too, like, I know it's not been remade, but, like, holy crap. Anyway, the point of this video was specifically Resident Evil Village, and once again, she's just like coming home to an old friend that you haven't seen forever. You don't really text as much because you have your own lives and shit to do, but every time you get together, you're sure to have a good time, and that, for me, is what Resident Evil Village is. So, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'd like to hear your thoughts. If you have a cozy game that's kind of a little bit more like WTF, definitely put it in the comments and let me know about it.